The infamous Cyberpunk is here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are doing awesome. I hope you guys are enjoying Cyberpunk if you guys are already playing it and diving straight in. If you guys are here because you're wondering if your computer can run it, that is exactly what we are going to determine today. So I am currently running my i7 6700K and my RTX 3080. And today we are going to go ahead and take a look at the brand new release just last night, Cyberpunk 2077. This game is absolutely gorgeous. From the brief mini testing that I've done, I tried to skip all of the spoiler-esque dialogue and just get straight into the more open world sense of things so I can actually just show you guys what it looks like when it's not a scripted indoor event. But this game is freaking gorgeous. So if we go ahead and look at the settings here, I am running the game at 1080p currently, but we will be testing out 3840 by 2160, aka 4K, at some point in this video as well. So we are currently running the game on absolute highest settings possible, sparing no expenses, turning everything up. Even the screen space reflection quality defaulted to ultra. I turn it up to psycho because I want to see how much this game can really make your computer scream at the highest point. So if you have something lower spec like a 2060 Super or a 2080 Super or something like that, you know that if psycho is too much, you can turn it down to just something lower like a medium setting, and then you should be fine. We have ray tracing in here, and actually the cool thing about this game, the cool thing that I will give this game major props for, is they have all three types of ray tracing. They have the reflections, they have the shadows, and they have the lighting as well. As far as I'm aware, the only game that has done that is Control, and that game is a huge PC benchmark for that reason. So Cyberpunk is absolutely going to be a PC benchmark for the next couple of years. Cyberpunk is going to join the ranks of good PC benchmarks and even console benchmarks, because it's kind of like flexing the consoles a little bit too, if you guys have seen the stuff on Twitter and things like that as well. And of course, as with any brand new game on the market nowadays, we do have the inclusion of DLSS, so you guys can go ahead and include this into your gameplay if you're not getting the FPS you would want. But yeah, we are currently just going to jump into the game at 1080p maximum settings with everything on absolutely maximum quality, because that is exactly what I want to see, how this game runs at maximum quality on an i7 6700K and a 3080. So without further ado, I think we should jump into the game, and we are going to, again, no spoilers, we're just going to jump in and free roam and just look at the world and how it runs in certain scenarios and things like that. But let's go ahead and jump in. Alright guys, we are in game now. We are in our apartment thing, I think. And we are currently getting about 50 to 55 FPS in our apartment at maximum settings, 1080p with ray tracing fully on, everything, just everything turned up to 11 at 1080p. Getting about, well, okay, now it's in the 40s, but I think that's just because of this one room. But we're only using we're using under 10 gigs of our RAM, which is actually kind of cool to see, because most modern games now use about 11 to 12 of the 16 gigs that I have. We're using 70-ish%, roughly averaging about 70% of our CPU, but we're using all 100% or 99% of our 3080, which is beautiful. I love seeing that GPU get flexed like that, although that CPU usage is pretty high. I'm hoping that dropping down to 4K will lessen that a little bit, and maybe it'll even run better than what 1080p is running, but who knows. But yeah, it's not bad. I think that's, well, okay, to me that's playable. 45 to 60 FPS, anywhere in that range, that's not bad. I don't think that's terrible. But then again, I also, I'm just wanting to play this game, so I just want to play this game. And of course, the game is absolutely stunning, too. This is only one interior space, and it does look really freaking nice. I gotta give them major credit on just it looks so good, man. It looks so nice. The detail on everything, all the little objects and stuff, it looks so good. All right, so what I want to see is if we're in this one little interior space, right? How does it run if we turn off ray tracing in this one spot right here? Let's just go ahead and turn off ray tracing and see how we go. All right, so ray tracing is now off, and we have jumped up into the 90s here without ray tracing. So, as per usual, if you guys have played any game with ray tracing on, like Call of Duty Cold War or Control or Shadow of the Tomb Raider, adding ray tracing will severely drop your frame rate. Severely. This one seems to be not as severe as like Control or Call of Duty Cold War. Like with Cold War, we would turn off ray tracing and we would double our frame rate. In this one, we were only getting an extra like 30 or 40, which is a significant chunk, but not nearly as great as like going from, you know, like 60 up to 120. But still, in the mid 90s, almost the hundreds in this interior space here is pretty impressive. So without ray tracing, getting in the mid 90s, that is pretty impressive. And it still looks really nice too. Like, it still looks beautiful. Totally playable without ray tracing, absolutely. 100%, at least in this one room. Let's go see how, like, walking around the halls with ray tracing on is. So I'm going to turn on ray tracing, and I'm going to cut back to when we're walking in the halls. Alright, so ray tracing is back on. Let's go ahead and leave our little apartment thing here. Getting the 50s still. Like 45 to 50 FPS when we're walking around. And oh my god, this game is absolutely stunning, dude. This game is... It's just ridiculous how good this game looks. Ray tracing doing work here, man. I don't know, 45 FPS, to me, that's kind of... I would consider that playable. And there's so many different AI here as well. I think that's going to be the biggest make or break here, is how many, like, how your CPU can handle all of this AI going on. Like, that's incredible. Like, there's just so much going on everywhere that it's up to your CPU to handle it. And as you can see, we're using about 75% of our CPU in this one spot. Like, we've been using nonstop 75% of the 6700K since we started. Alright, so let's go ahead and take this elevator down. We're going to drop into, hopefully, the city streets, and we're going to see how it runs in, like, a major city intersection. Let's go see how that looks. Alright, guys, so we are now down at the bottom of the elevator. We are now exiting into the... Oh, man, this open world. Wow. Holy crap, dude. This is gorgeous. This is... Wow. Alright, so as you can see, there's a ton of AI here. A ton of random people walking around. This city looks busy. Sometimes you see populated cities that have like maybe 5 people walking around. This one has like dozens of people walking around. This is... Wow. The outfits on people. They look so good, man. So we're in this populated area down here, and we're getting about 40 FPS with everything on maximum quality, ray tracing on, everything turned up to 11. And now, as you can see, look at the numbers in the top left corner. We are using still 99% of our GPU, but now we're using 90% of our CPU. Solid. This game absolutely flexes both in 1080p. I'm not sure how 4K is going to run it, how 4K is going to treat your CPU or GPU in this matter, but, well, of course, GPU is going to be pegged at 100%, but 90% GPU or CPU usage here is, wow. I mean, that's to be expected with all of this, like, all the smoke happening, all the AI walking around, everything going on. Like, that's a lot for your CPU to take in. Like, that's a lot, you know? So what I want to see is I want to go ahead and see how this game runs in this exact scene without ray tracing on. So let's go ahead and turn ray tracing off and see how it runs. Alright, so ray tracing is now off. And we're in the 50s. It didn't do much, actually. I think that's because we're entirely CPU bound. Because of all the AI going on, like all the people walking around and all the particles and smoke effects and stuff. I think we're entirely CPU bound here. Because, like, without ray tracing on, look at that. Without ray tracing on, our GPU usage is only in, like, the 60s or 70s, but our CPU is still in the 90s. So we're entirely CPU bound here. I would actually consider at least the past few scenes that we've had with the interior apartment and this exterior little intersection part, I would count these as CPU bottlenecked. I would. And of course, this is on an older CPU that's an i7-6700K. So of course, it could always run better on a newer CPU as well. But I think we're completely CPU bound here. So I'm going to keep walking around a little bit, just taking a look at the beautiful city, man, because this game is absolutely stunning, man. Ugh. Okay, and now as we walk away from that busy intersection, our FPS is actually slowly climbing up into the 70s, which is good to see. We still have ray tracing off, so it's going to definitely drop once we turn that back on, but it is nice to see that once we walk away from a busy, you know, intersection with a bunch of people, we actually do gain a bit of FPS back. Alright, so now that we have walked a bit away from that busy intersection and we have gained some of our FPS back, we're in the 60s and 70s now, what I want to try is this exact scene with ray tracing on to see how much it drops that FPS back down. Alright, so ray tracing is back on in this exact spot, and I'm already seeing a big difference visually, at least on my end. Like it's beautiful with ray tracing on, man. And we've dropped back down into the 40s, like the mid 40s. So I guess so far, if, you know, only a few minutes into this actual test here, if you were wondering if an i7-6700K or somewhere like an equivalent CPU with a higher end GPU can actually run Cyberpunk, I would wager to say yes. If you don't have ray tracing on and you don't have your expectations super crazy high for frame rate. Like, if you are okay with getting 50 to 60 FPS maybe, then yeah, you can run this game on an older CPU with a newer GPU. But this game is extremely taxing even on, as you can see, like, more high-end systems. Like, a 3080 is really struggling with this game. Alright, so what I want to try is I want to steal a car and see how that drives. Like, I want to steal a car and see how it performs when we're driving around. So, give me your car. Alright. There we go. Alright, get some driving in here. Again, maximum settings, 1080p. Holy crap, I can't see. It's too bright. There we go. Driving feels good. Driving feels nice and smooth. I like it. The interior dash looking pretty... Wow, that's actually a lot of detail for an interior dash like that. I don't know how to make it third person, though. Alright, so we are now on the road driving to see how the frames drop and how it just tanks your performance, which... So it looks like they're not pulling a Ubisoft, and your game does not just hemorrhage frames if you start driving. We're still in the mid-40s, and it looks freaking gorgeous, man. Absolutely stunning. The only thing that I have to warn people about that I'm already seeing even on my end a little bit, is if you're driving in a car, this is going to flex any hard drive you have. This game is absolutely built for an SSD. Yeah, that much I can tell you, that this game is built for an SSD, so if you are trying to run it on some, like, 5400 RPM hard drive, good luck. I've seen some of the Twitter videos and Twitter posts about people on, like, the consoles, like the base PS4 and the base Xbox One, that are seeing major pop-in where textures and high-quality models take, like, 20 seconds to pop in because their hard drive just can't keep up. Alright, so now that we've seen how this game runs at 1080p maximum settings with ray tracing while driving, let's just turn off ray tracing and see how it performs in driving now. If we go from the mid-40s to like maybe the 60s, because maybe ray tracing is just something that you should just turn off. Alright, so ray tracing is back off now, and we are already in the 80s. We're already in the 80s, and you can tell because there's like no AI around you at all. So we are actually still in the 90s for GPU and the 80s and 90s for CPU usage, with still under 10 gigs of RAM being used and only 7.5 gigabytes of video memory being used. That's incredible. That just shows how absolutely unoptimized Watch Dogs Legion is. Because that game was maxing out my 10 gigs, and it doesn't have nearly as much detail or the graphical power that this game has. Like that, Watch Dogs Legion is like my new low. As long as you don't do what that game does, then you're freaking perfect in my mind. All right, so let's go ahead and start driving and see how this performs at 1080p with ray tracing off. Not bad so far. Not bad, getting in the 60s and 70s. So yeah, if you have the horsepower, if you have like a higher end like 2080 Ti or something like that paired with an older CPU, I think you would be fine. Just turn off ray tracing and you'd be fine to run this game maximum settings. Getting 60 to 70 FPS, that's totally playable, man. Absolutely. And this is not even with DLSS either. This is without DLSS on. So I think it's completely playable, dude. Alright guys, I think that will do it for the 1080p portion of this video. Let's go ahead and see how much we can make my GPU scream by testing 4K. Let's go ahead and do that. I'll see you guys in a bit. Alright guys, welcome back. We are running the game at 4K here, as you guys can see. So, I will say, one thing about this game is that it does not like running 4K on a non-4K monitor. It technically runs the game at 4K, and like the performance impact is still there, but it won't actually record the game in 4K, like Shadowplay for some reason, the thing that I use to record all my gameplays. Even though I have it set up to where it will record whatever resolution my game is running at, like the in-game resolution is what determines the video file's resolution. Even though I have it set up like that, it just will not record higher than 1080p. And that's because I'm running a 1080p monitor, so even though I am technically running the game at 4K, it's downscaling to 1080p, and that's what Shadowplay is recording with this game. So it's this video you're watching will not be in 4K, I don't believe, because I just cannot get the video to save at a 4K resolution. So we are running the game at 4K though. We are running it at absolute max settings yet again, with ray tracing on, DLSS off, but we will probably be turning that back on, or not back on, but turning that on, just so that way we can guarantee that we get a smooth experience to see how that actually helps the overall performance of the game here. But let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so we are in game here, and wow, 12 to 13 FPS, sometimes like almost the 10 FPS range. Oh my god, this is scary. So if you were wondering if you can run this game at maximum settings with ray tracing on at 4K, probably not, because this is unplayable. I'm gonna deem it unplayable. Yeah, this is bad. Let's go see if turning ray tracing off will help. Alright, so with ray tracing off, it's better. We're at like in the 20s now, which is better, definitely better. But I still wouldn't want to play in the 20s, man. Like, regardless of if I was like some person who needed the absolute like crispest image, the sharpest image possible with 4K, I still wouldn't deem 20 FPS playable. I really wouldn't. But at 4K, in this busy intersection, without ray tracing, we're still using 50% of our CPU. 50%. I mean, granted, it's because there's a ton of AI and things happening here. This is a very busy part. Alright, so I want to see something real quick. I want to see how this game will run if we keep it exactly as it is without ray tracing on, but turn on something like the DLSS mode for like quality or something. Let's see how much just like the quality DLSS will actually help us here. Alright, so we have no ray tracing on, maximum settings, 4K, with the quality DLSS mode, and we're in the 40s now. which is fairly decent in my experience. And it looks really good still. You know, trying to scale that lower image up, of course you're going to have a little bit of issue with some of the finer details like these grates here. But overall, I would say it looks really nice. Like, this is... I would say if you're really desperate to play this game, 40 FPS like this is playable. This is playable. For some of you, you might disagree. You might want that 60 FPS butter smooth. Just that butter smooth 60 FPS aspect. And I agree, but I think there's a lot of people out there who just want their computer to play the video game at all. So if they have to turn down settings, they're going to just to make it play it. Which I think is what we're running into with this game is you're going to have to play it with like no ray tracing, quality DLSS on like medium settings, and it's still going to look really good. Like, I mean, we're at 40 FPS on ultra settings with no ray tracing at the quality DLSS. And it looks really freaking nice, like really nice. Let's see if we can get that to 60. Let's just stop right here and see if we can get that 40 up to like a 60. Okay, so I changed the DLSS mode from quality to performance, which I'm not sure what the internal resolution of it will be, but this actually isn't bad. This isn't that bad at all, honestly. We're actually closing in on that 60 FPS mark as well. Like, we're in the 50s and 60s. Or should I say high 50s, almost 60s. And it still looks really good. I can't speak to how it would look on an actual 4K screen, but at least for me, it doesn't look that bad. It really doesn't. It looks clean. It looks the same. It's just running better. We're at a point now where if the performance did not increase by turning on DLSS, I would have no idea DLSS was even active. Like, it looks the same, and the only actual thing that's letting me know it's activated is that my FPS has increased by like double. Not even double, like triple. We went from in the 20s to almost in the 60s. I want to see something though. I want to test if we were to turn off DLSS, turn back on ray tracing, but then turn the game down to like medium settings. Like, how does it handle that, you know? Okay, so I'm not sure if anything actually changed. I put the game to medium settings, which it's a mixture of low and medium settings for things. I turned DLSS off and ray tracing on, and it's running worse than it was originally. So now I'm unsure of what's actually happening. Let's go back to Ultra and see what happens, I guess. Okay, so we're not back on Ultra. I instead decided to just turn off ray tracing, but keep everything on medium, and now we're in the 50s. now we're in like the mid 40s to 50s, like, I don't know what ray tracing was doing there, or like what was happening exactly. Like, maybe we were hitting like some VRAM issue. I don't know. I actually have no idea what was happening. But we're in the mid 40s to 50s. So this is what medium looks like at 4K. So if you guys are actually okay with how this looks, like, I'm pretty happy with how this looks on medium. So if you're okay with how this looks, set your game to medium, and you can probably play this game pretty stably at 4K. Like, we don't even have DLSS on. We just have everything on medium with no ray tracing, and we're getting 40 to 50 FPS in 4K. Like, this is tolerable. I like this, you know? I wish the FPS was slightly better, but that's where, like, here, actually, you know what? For science, we're going to keep it exactly as it is, but turn on the quality DLSS mode and see how that goes. Alright guys, here we are on the quality preset for DLSS here, and wow, this is like extremely playable. So medium settings at 4K, no ray tracing, and the quality preset for DLSS. 60 FPS. This is playable. If you run a 4K monitor with like an older processor and like a semi-high-end GPU of any kind, like if you're running a 2080 Ti, or if you were lucky enough to score like a 3070 or something like that, like, this is totally playable. I don't have any issues with this at all. Alright, so I have switched us back to the ultra settings with the quality preset for DLSS, and we're using ray tracing again, and this game, it's just so beautiful, man. If you have the horsepower to run this game at like the highest settings possible, oh my god, you're gonna enjoy every second of it. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to see how this game will actually run if we get into a car and start driving at 4K. I want to see how it handles it. Alright, so here we are driving in 4K ultra settings with ray tracing on, using the quality DLSS mode. And we're getting about mid-30s to almost 40s, which to me, I would consider this playable. If you need 4K, I would tolerate this kind of an experience. Although I will have you guys note that look at our CPU and GPU uses. We're using 90% plus for both. Like, we're in the 90s for both of them. So you kind of are CPU and GPU limited for this. This is just like a fully next-gen game. This game is just so beefy that it just requires a lot from every part of your computer. If you were going to upgrade your computer for any game that was coming out, it would be this one. It would be this one for sure. I am curious to see how this game would run with a newer processor like a 5950X or like a 10900K or something along those lines, like a newer high-end processor. I am very curious to see how this game would run on those, because we're even at 4K, we're in like the 30s to 40s to all the way to like the 90% range for CPU usage, even at 4K. So even though this is a totally playable experience at 4K, like, I don't know if I'd actually recommend anyone play on these settings, because like, we're on the performance DLSS mode. If you don't activate DLSS in 4K, you're gonna be stuck with like 20 to 30 FPS. Okay, I wanted to see how this game would run with the performance DLSS mode on, completely ultra settings, but without ray tracing. And we're actually in the 60s, or nearing the 60s. And of course, it is up to you guys on what you guys are willing to sacrifice and turn down in order to actually achieve what you would deem as completely tolerable settings or frame rates for this game. For me, I would not mind playing this game at 45 to 50 FPS at 1080p on the complete ultra settings with everything turned on. Alright guys, I think that will go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something. I hope this either put your minds at ease that maybe you can just turn down settings, or maybe this gave you a plan of what you're going to need in order to play this game if you're maybe upgrading or building a new PC. But thank you very much for watching, guys. You guys are amazing. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Be sure to subscribe if you guys are new here. Like the video if you enjoyed. My Twitch link is going to be in the description if you guys want to come hang out with me whenever I go live. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye, guys.